Let me tell you what's actually happening in Britain right now. The country that, survived 2 world wars, partly by feeding itself, is quietly, systematically dismantling the very system that lets it do that.
Right.
And almost nobody in power seems to care.
Yeah, it's a foundational collapse.
Exactly. Because when you pick up a loaf of bread or like a pint of milk at the supermarket, do you ever really think about the fragile chain of events that got it there?
Most people definitely don't.
They don't. But more than half of UK farmers, over 50%, said in a survey last year that they've considered leaving the industry. And not, moaning about it or venting on Twitter, actually considered walking away for good.
Which is just staggering. That's not a protest. That's people telling you the whole thing is falling apart.
It really is. So we're doing a deep dive today into a whole stack of sources that map out this breaking point in British farming. We've got a really poignant piece from Unheard, written by an actual farmer, some deep analysis of government policy, and the surprisingly serious advocacy of Jeremy Clarkson.
Yeah, that last one usually catches people off guard.
Oh, totally. Our mission today is to uncover why 50% of an entire foundational industry wants to quit, and why this invisible crisis is about to hit your weekly grocery bill. Okay, let's unpack this.
Before we jump in, we really need to set a quick ground rule for everyone listening.
Good point, yeah.
Because we are going to be talking about some heavily debated political decisions today, specifically policies from Chancellor Rachel Reeves and the Labour government, and obviously the ongoing post-Brexit realities.
Right. And to be absolutely clear, we are exploring these policies exactly as they're presented in the sources.
Exactly. We are not endorsing or condemning any political party. We're not taking sides. We're just, trying to understand the farmers' reactions based on the source material provided.
Exactly. We're just looking at the math and the fallout. Speaking of fallout, let's talk about the guy currently driving a tractor right through the middle of this. Jeremy Clarkson. Look, I know what you're thinking. Top-gear bloke. Loud opinions. Is it entirely possible he's just, being dramatic for television? It feels like a celebrity opening a restaurant and complaining about dishwashers.
I mean, that's the natural reaction. But what's fascinating here is his role as a translator. Most people living in cities have zero granular understanding of food production.
Right. They just see the quaint little fields out the train window.
Exactly. But Clarkson bought an actual farm in Oxfordshire. Diddly squat. And he didn't just lease it out. He learned it from scratch, made every possible mistake, had Caleb Cooper wanting to just pull his hair out on a daily basis.
And he broadcast the absolute misery of it to millions of people. The failed sheep, the tractor sinking in the mud, the endless planning permission nightmares.
But off camera, something shifted. He started talking differently. Our sources point out that he doesn't call farming frustrating. He specifically calls it soul-destroying.
Wow. Soul-destroying. That's heavy from a guy who usually makes a joke out of everything.
It is. And he's taking it seriously. He banned most Labour MPs from his pub, the Farmer's Dog, out of pure frustration. He launched that For Farm's Sake campaign.
Right.
But the crucial part is he explicitly admits his own privilege. He says, look, if the farm loses money, I have Amazon Prime money to cover it. I'm rich, I can walk away.
But the people down the road can't.
Exactly. He stays and shouts about it to shine a light on the issue for the guys who don't have that safety net.
So if someone with Amazon money calls it soul-destroying, we have to look at what's actually destroying it. Let's start with a thing that lit the fuse in late 2024.
The October budget.
Right, October 2024. Chancellor Rachel Reeves announces that from April 2026, agricultural land worth over £1 million is going to face a 20% inheritance tax.
Which was previously fully protected under agricultural property relief.
Right. Now, on paper, targeting massive hedge funds or aristocrats dodging taxes sounds reasonable. Right. So where does this get really interesting, and why did it backfire so spectacularly?
It backfired because it shows a fundamental misunderstanding of farming economics. You really have to grasp this concept of being asset-rich but cash-poor.
Okay, break that down for us.
So, to a normal person, £1 million is life-changing wealth. But a working food-producing farm isn't a house. The land alone, the barns, the milking parlors that can easily be valued at £2 or £3 million.
Right, because you just need so much physical space to grow farm.
Exactly. But the family living on that £3 million farm might barely clear £40,000 a year in actual profit.
Jeez, 40 grand.
Yeah. So what happens when the farmer dies and the kids inherit this 2 million-pound farm, but they instantly get hit with a 200,000-pound tax bill?
They can't pay it out of a 40 grand salary.
They absolutely can't. And banks won't loan them the money because they don't have the cash flow to make the monthly payment.
Right. The margins are just too thin. So what do? Sell a piece of it.
You can't really subdivide a working farm easily. If you sell the 50 acres with the water access, the rest of the farm fails. Plus, you lose the economies of scale for your expensive machinery.
So they have to sell the whole thing.
That's the brutal irony the sources highlight. They sell the land. And who has the liquid cash to buy it?
The housing developers.
Yeah.
Or the exact hedge funds the policy was meant to target.
Exactly. It accelerates the very corporate consolidation it was supposed to stop.
Man, that is just no wonder they flooded the streets. The sources talk about November 2024. Thousands of farmers and tractors in London. Signs everywhere saying, no farmers, no food, no future.
And Clarkson was right there in the crowd, pleading with the government to back down.
Yeah, genuinely angry.
Yeah.
And they kept the pressure up for over a year until, what, December 2025?
Right. The government finally did a partial U-turn. They raised the threshold to $2.5 million per person, $5 million per couple.
So, crisis averted. Most family farms are protected now.
Financially, yes. The immediate threat of a forced sale was softened. But the sources are very clear about this. The psychological damage was already done.
How so?
Think about the 14 months between the announcement and the U-turn. Farming requires planning years in advance. Crop rotations, buying machinery, succession planning.
Oh, I see.
For over a year, these farmers were paralyzed. They didn't know if they would even own the land in 2 years. So they stopped investing. They stopped planning. You can't put a biological system on pause for 14 months without causing massive structural damage.
That makes total sense. 14 months of total paralysis. But, the inheritance tax was really just the headline, wasn't it?
Absolutely.
Because the reason a 200,000-pound tax bill is impossible to pay is because of what was already happening to the day-to-day balance sheet. There's this piece in Unheard written by a farmer, and it is genuinely terrifying.
Yeah, he really breaks down the crushing math of everyday farming.
Let's talk about fuel. He mentions red diesel. That's the subsidized fuel they use for tractors, right?
Right. It used to sit around 70 to 75 pence a liter.
And now?
Now it's over £1.15 in some areas. And remember, tractors burn massive amounts of fuel every single hour.
That alone is a huge hit. But then there's the fertilizer issue, which just blew my mind.
Yes. Synthetic fertilizer.
Yeah.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it really shows our global fragility.
Because it's tied to natural gas.
Right. Exactly. The Haber-Bosch process, which makes modern fertilizer, requires huge amounts of energy and hydrogen, basically derived from natural gas. So when a war breaks out overseas or pipelines are disrupted...
Geopolitics literally dictates the cost of growing a crop in the UK.
Yes. The farmer in the Unheard piece said the cost of growing a single hectare of crops went up by 150 to 250 pounds.
Just because the world got more unstable. So if you have a 200-hectare farm, which isn't even that big, that's an extra 30 to 50,000 pounds in cost.
An extra 50 grand you have to find, with no guarantee the supermarket will pay you enough to cover it at harvest time.
Speaking of supermarkets, let's talk about the dairy farmer from that same piece. He said war-driven costs added like 200 to 500 pounds to the cost of every single cow.
Right. So a modest herd of 150 cows, that's up to 75,000 pounds in extra pressure.
But wait, why can't the farmer just raise the price of milk?
Because they have almost zero negotiating power. Supermarkets use milk as a loss leader. They squeeze the margins so tight that farmers were already making a loss before these global spikes even hit.
So they're bleeding money on every single liter of milk. They're basically paying to do the work.
Exactly. And the Cambridgeshire Shepherd is another great example from the sources. He uses 3 tanks of fuel a week just moving his flocks. That's an extra 180 pounds a week just on fuel.
And didn't he say he just completely stopped using synthetic fertilizer this spring?
He did, because he couldn't afford it, which means less grass, which means fewer sheep. The land is physically producing less food.
Wow. And then, on top of all these costs, you have the labor crisis. We have to report the post-Brexit reality here, just neutrally, as the sources stated.
Right.
For decades, they relied on Eastern European seasonal workers to do the really grueling physical work of picking fruit and vegetables.
Because it's highly migratory seasonal work, it's not suited for a settled domestic workforce with year-round mortgages.
Right. But post-Brexit, Those workers aren't arriving in the same numbers.
The visa system is bogged down in red tape, according to the sources. So you have a situation where a farmer takes all the financial risk, grows a perfect crop, and then watches it rot in the field because there's no one to pick it.
It's just a compounding disaster. And when costs rise and stability completely vanishes, people are forced to make unthinkable decisions. This brings us to the Garden of England.
Kent. Yes, the story of Jack Highwood.
Yeah. He used to grow 300 to 400 acres of arable crops, mainly milling wheat for bread, enough to, quote, feed Kent for a week.
And now he has stopped sowing crops entirely.
Wait, entirely. He has hundreds of acres of prime soil and he's just leaving it empty.
Yes. And it wasn't the weather, it was purely economics. Borrowing tens of thousands of pounds up front for fuel and fertilizer without knowing what the supermarket will pay you 6 months later isn't farming anymore.
It's gambling. It's like going to a casino where the house takes your money whether you win or lose.
Exactly. He decided the risk was just too high to even turn the tractors on.
I mean, if the most productive farmers in the best parts of the country think planting food is too risky, what does that mean for the rest of us?
It means we are breaking the social contract. This is a recurring phrase in the source material.
The social contract between society and the farmers.
Right. Historically, after the Second World War, the implicit deal was you endure the brutal work to feed the nation, and we will protect you from volatile foreign markets so you can survive.
And the sources are arguing that this contract has been quietly ripped up.
Policy by policy, free trade deal by free trade deal. We demanded cheaper food, and the government stripped away the safety nets to give it to us.
Okay, so what does this all mean for us? If Kent isn't growing wheat and dairy farmers are quitting, where is our food actually coming from?
Well, currently, Britain produces about 60% of its own food.
Okay, 60%.
Which means 40% is imported, and that relies on incredibly stable trade routes, favorable foreign weather, and most importantly, countries that are willing to sell to us rather than feed their own populations during a crisis.
Right. If there's a global wheat shortage, why would a foreign country ship its wheat to London? They'd keep it.
Exactly. And there's a critical quote from an Eat Farm Now piece that really highlights the hypocrisy here.
Oh, yeah, the one about the standards.
Yes. A farmer says, we don't want to be importing wheat that's grown to lesser standards than us, used with chemicals that we banned here 20 years ago.
That is just wild to me. The government makes it illegal for a British farmer to use a specific pesticide because it's bad for the environment.
Right.
But then they sign a free trade deal allowing supermarkets to import wheat from a country that still uses that exact banned chemical.
Because it's cheaper.
You're forcing the British farmer to compete with illegal in the UK standards. No wonder they're going bankrupt.
It's an accumulation of hardships across multiple governments, eliminating production subsidies, adding the inheritance tax threat, raising employer national insurance, adding massive regulatory burdens, and then bringing in cheap, substandard imports.
And for you listening, this isn't just a sad story about rural communities. This is directly hitting your wallet. Food inflation hit nearly 20% in March 2023.
And analysts project another 4% rise in late 2025.
And that's before factoring in all the new fertilizer and fuel spirals we just talked about. Your weekly shop is going to get more expensive. That's not a maybe.
This raises an important question, really the ultimate synthesis of all this data. Food security is national security.
So absolutely.
If that 60% domestic production drops to 50 or 40 or 30%, Britain becomes entirely dependent on the goodwill of an increasingly unstable world. We treat defense budgets seriously, but we're treating food production like a hobby.
Which brings us back to Jeremy Clarkson's warning. You really have two choices. You can have cheap, chemically sprayed imports, or you can support British farmers, pay a bit more, and actually know what's in your food.
It's a choice you make in the supermarket aisle.
Exactly. Picture yourself in the aisle later today. You're looking at two products. The cheaper one, from unknown origins, grown under unknown rules, and the British one. It costs a little more, but it represents a farmer in Yorkshire or Kent who woke up at 5 a.m. and decided to try for one more season.
To not walk away.
Right. But I want to leave you with one final thought today. We've talked so much about the farmers leaving and the land being sold off to corporate funds or developers. But think about the knowledge it takes to run a farm.
The generational knowledge.
Yeah. Knowing which field floods, how the soil reacts to a dry summer. If the families who actually know how to work the land are permanently replaced by holding companies who only know how to work a spreadsheet, what happens to the soil itself a generation from now?
That is the real danger.
It really is. Who actually inherits the earth? when the farmers are gone.